Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is the show where you hand us a massive stack of articles, research papers, legal docs, even trade secrets buried in online forums.
Yeah, and we deliver the intellectual shortcut.
Exactly. The core insights, the surprising facts, and the deeper implications so you can walk away truly informed.
We're here to give you the signal from the noise. And today, we are going deep, really deep, into the origins of that noise itself.
We're investigating a fascinating and, frankly, a pretty disturbing craft. The practice of meticulously engineered dialogue in modern media. Our focus today is on this dark, really complex art of editing known as the frankenbite.
I love that name.
It's a great name, isn't it? And this isn't just, cutting his speech down for time. This is dialogue that is painstakingly stitched together from totally disparate moments.
Right, creating sentences that were never actually spoken in sequence. And this practice, it underpins the narrative structure of, well, almost everything we watch.
Everything, from reality dating shows to, and this is the scary part, high-stakes political news reports.
And the source material we pulled for you it's just expansive. It takes us right into the editing suites, with insider discussions from the people who actually perform these cuts.
And then it shifts completely.
Completely. It goes right to the hallowed halls of law, analyzing these really complex legal conflicts about defamation, contractual rights, all in the reality TV world. We even have fMRI data exploring how our brains process these manipulations.
So our mission today is, well, it's to pull back the curtain. We're going to unpack the anatomy of this synthetic soundbite.
We'll explore the deep psychological and editorial manipulation used to create what we're told is unscripted narrative.
And then we'll examine the really serious legal battles that erupt when that crucial line between objective fact and, manufactured fiction is just irreversibly blurred in the public eye.
Because the stakes here are incredibly high. We're not just talking about bad television.
Not at all.
We are talking about wrecked reputations, massive financial liabilities, and maybe even the fundamental ability of the audience to tell truth from really sophisticated deception.
So let's start right at the beginning. What exactly is a frankenbite, and how in the world do they pull off the trick? Okay, let's unpack this term frankenbite. It's so evocative, isn't it? It immediately makes you think of the Frankenstein myth.
It really does. You picture these editors stitching together, well, audio parts to create something that walks and talks but isn't quite natural.
So what's the precise definition we should be working with?
That analogy is actually perfect because a frankenbite short for a Frankenstein soundbite is the process of taking individual words or maybe short phrases from entirely different parts of a conversation.
Okay.
Or even from entirely different days of filming and then splicing them together to create a single, cohesive, synthesized statement.
And the key part is the person never actually spoke that full sentence.
Never. Not as one single utterance. That's the crucial part.
So just to be clear, we're not talking about removing the ums and ahs or just shortening a long sentence.
No, this is dialogue creation. And what's really interesting in the sources is that this technique, it isn't some deep, dark secret in the production industry.
Really?
No, it's an acknowledged high-level skill. It requires immense technical and narrative expertise, which has, in turn elevated the status of the people who do it.
Especially in reality TV.
Oh, absolutely. Especially there.
And that leads us to this wonderful, and I have to say slightly sinister term for the person doing the job.
Yes. In the reality TV world, the people responsible for these decisions are often given this merged title of predator.
A predator.
Yeah, a contraction of producer and editor. And this is more than just a name change. It's an acknowledgement that these people aren't just cutting the best takes available.
They're doing more.
So much more. They have deep creative input. They are actively scripting the unscripted, often writing the entire narrative arc using only the words the participant has given them in any context over the whole shoot.
Wow. And because they have this huge creative burden, the responsibility for generating all the drama, the sources point out they command way more respect.
And significantly higher pay.
Right. Higher pay within the reality TV industry compared to a traditional editor on a scripted drama where, the story's already locked in.
Exactly. They are the true masters of the narrative. They're valued for their ability to find that narrative gold within, the rubble of raw footage.
So if the editor is basically a ghostwriter, let's get into the mechanics. How do they actually pull off these seamless splices without us, the audience, noticing the jump cut in the audio? Because that's the real trick.
Well, This is where the sheer volume of source material becomes the editor's greatest asset. They aren't just searching for the perfect
It's
quote.
searching for the perfect word.
That's it. It's an industrialized process, and it's built on what is essentially mass surveillance. Editors routinely deal with what they call dailies,
And that's all the footage from one day.
all the footage.
Yeah.
And it can run anywhere from 40 to a staggering 150 hours of raw footage.
Per day.
Per day. So to even begin to navigate this mountain of material, they have to use specialized software.
It's like having a digital library of every single word ever spoken on camera.
Exactly. Software like Abbott's PhraseFind allows them to search transcripts across entire weeks of filming for every single instance of a specific word or phrase. So imagine they need the sentence, "I hate that guy."
Okay.
They search for "I," then they search for "hate," and then they search for "guy." They might find those words spoken hours or even days apart in totally different contexts.
But once they've located those little audio islands, the real technical challenge is making the cut acoustically invisible. I mean, if the word hate ends abruptly and the word that starts with a clipped breath, you're going to notice it.
You absolutely will, subconsciously at least. And this is where the technical skill becomes almost microscopic. To get what they call a clean cut, editors look for specific acoustic windows.
Acoustic windows.
Yeah, the natural stopping point of a sound, or counterintuitively, the beginning of certain sounds known as plosive consonants.
Plosives. Okay, remind me. That's like TDP, BB sounds.
That's
So why are those useful for making a seamless cut?
because a plosive is created by a total stop of airflow, which is then followed by a sudden release of pressure. Think of that crisp, abrupt sound of a P or a T.
Okay.
That sudden, sharp noise provides this momentary, natural disruption in the acoustic flow. So the human ear, when it's focused on that sharp burst of sound, it tends to just skip over the tiny half-second gap or ambient change right before it.
So it's an auditory trick.
Hmm.
The plosive masks the grammatical error of the splice.
You got it. They are using our brain's natural tendency to skip over tiny errors in favor of a strong leading sound. It is absolutely surgical.
But I'm sure sometimes the splice is still audibly clunky within.
Oh, definitely. And that's when they use masking techniques, both on the audio and the visual fronts. If a splice is a little forced, they'll add strategic pauses filled with room tone.
Room tone being just the ambient sound of the room.
The natural, consistent ambient sound, whether it's the hum of an air conditioner or, the distant sound of waves, it smooths it over.
And visually, they have to cover up the video jump cut. Because if someone is speaking one word and then their head visibly jumps 3 inches to the left for the next word, that is the most obvious tell of all.
It's the dead giveaway. So they motivate the visual discontinuity by cutting away. You'll see B-roll footage, a sweeping shot of the house, a reaction shot of another contestant, maybe a text slide summarizing the rules.
So by the time the camera comes back to the speaker, we've mentally reset.
And the jump cut is completely hidden.
But this must get exponentially more complex when the words are pulled not just from different times, but maybe from different environments, or when the speaker sounds physically different.
Oh, that requires deep specialization. For instance, timbre matching is a technique they use to correct subtle shifts in a participant's voice.
Timbre. So the quality of their voice.
Exactly. Think about it. A participant might say one word when they're energized and awake in the morning, and the next word when they're exhausted, maybe a little sick, or even drunk late at night. Their vocal tone, their timbre changes.
Right.
So editors use sophisticated EQ, equalization software, to try and blend those vocal qualities to make them sound like they were recorded at the same moment.
That is just an incredible dedication to the lie. And what about when the words come from entirely different physical locations? Like one word was said by the pool and the next word was said in a quiet confessional room.
That's where ambience overlap comes in. If the spliced words were spoken in 2 different settings, the editor has to mask that change in the background sound.
So you don't hear the pool noise suddenly cut to a quiet indoor hum.
Right. They might overlay a consistent manufactured background noise, like the sound of crickets or street traffic or a bustling restaurant across the entire frankenbite. This unified ambience hides the fact that the words were actually spoken in completely different acoustic spaces.
It honestly sounds less like documentary work and more like a detailed forensic audio restoration.
But dedicated entirely to fiction.
Right. It's like they're restoring a fictional conversation using real acoustic parts.
That's a great way to frame it.
Which brings us to the crucial debate here. If this skill is used to take, say, a 5-minute rambling answer and distill it down to a coherent 30-second quote, Well, you could argue that's a benign service to clarity.
Mm.
But where does the line between streamlining and outright fabrication truly lie?
Well, the industry certainly leans very heavily on that benign justification. Producers and editors often argue that these cuts are necessary to streamline rambling explanations or shorten a chaotic story for clarity,
Or to cut through the BS?
or to cut out what they view as the participants' attempts to obfuscate what they are really saying. The justification is always that they are revealing the speaker's true intent, even if the speaker didn't articulate it perfectly.
I can see the utility there. If someone says, well, I don't really know, but I think I might possibly dislike that other person's demeanor, and you edit it to, I dislike that other person's demeanor, you could argue you just serve the intent efficiently.
You could, but the sources also provide these stunning and much more cynical examples of fabrication that move well past mere clarity and into the malicious realm of creating plot points out of thin air.
Let's talk about that infamous example from the dating experiment.
This case is, it's often cited in editing forums as the ultimate misuse of the technique. A female participant was just not connecting with one of her suitors, which was a fundamental problem for the episode plan narrative.
So the story wasn't working.
The story was dead in the water. So a producer, looking for content, asks her this innocuous question about her favorite celebrity. She replies, I absolutely love Adam Sandler.
Okay.
Later, in post-production, they isolate that phrase, splice out Adam Sandler, and just drop in the suitor's name. Yes. Constructing a quote that manufactured a crush where absolutely none existed.
That is not editing. That is actively writing a story and forcing a participant to endorse a relationship they actually rejected. The intent is completely fabricated.
And this fabrication, it extends beyond dialogue to the use of what they call cheating footage.
Cheating footage.
This is when editors pair unrelated surveillance video or B-roll with constructed audio or even contextual music to represent a participant's perspective or reaction, even if the footage and the audio were totally unrelated in time or space.
Can you give us a concrete example of how cheating footage creates a villain?
Sure. Think about a high-stakes competition show, something like The Amazing Race. A contestant might have been cast as the hothead.
The archetype.
The archetype. The production team needs to maintain that narrative. So the contestant, maybe they're just bored or exhausted from a grueling travel day, gives the camera a hard stare or an eye roll.
A moment that means nothing in real life.
Nothing at all. But that moment is then edited together with audio of him later berating a cab driver during a totally different leg of the race.
So the visual of the angry stare paired with the audio of the verbal abuse makes the two events seem like they happened at the same time.
It makes them appear concurrent and related, all to heighten his perceived malice.
The editing creates the narrative truth in our minds. The visual is the proof of the emotional state, even if the footage and audio were completely unrelated.
Exactly. And as our sources also mention, in truly extreme cases, like a case involving Joe Millionaire, producers allegedly dubbed audio and added sound effects to make a scene look as if participants were engaging in inappropriate conduct behind trees when they were just walking.
That crosses every boundary into outright fictionalization.
It does. That case illustrates the immense power of the editor. They can reshape reality to the point where they are fabricating events and confessions, and they're relying on our deep-seated tendency to trust our senses. What we see and hear must be real, even if we know intellectually that the show is edited.
That sense of reality, that perceived truth, is so central to the next major area we looked at. The confessional interview.
The ITM.
Right. The individual interview or interview takeaway. We, as viewers, we rely on these moments to be the unfiltered access into a participant's true mind, the moment of narrative bridge.
But our sources revealed they are these meticulously engineered artifacts of post-production, often filmed long, long after the fact.
It's not happening in the moment.
Almost never. The success of reality television narratives depends entirely on maintaining the illusion of simultaneity. The audience needs to believe that the emotional download they're getting from the participant, the tears, the rage, the strategic insight, is happening right now, concurrent with the action on screen.
But the production reality is far messier, and the timing is often deliberately displaced, sometimes by hours, sometimes by months.
Oh yeah. It's all about what's useful for the narrative. Consider a competitive cooking show like Top Chef. The confessionals are rarely concurrent with the action.
So when are they filmed?
They're often recorded at least 3 times per episode. After the quickfire challenge, after the elimination challenge prep, and then again after the elimination itself.
So participants are being forced to recall and perform emotions for events that ended hours earlier.
Usually when they're physically exhausted, highly stressed, or they already know the outcome of a conflict.
You're recalling an intense argument that happened at 10 a.m. while you're filming your interview at 10 p.m. That's temporal displacement on a micro scale.
Now magnify that. On higher budget, longer running franchises like Real Housewives or, the Vanderpump Rules spin-offs, those talking head segments are often filmed in grueling marathons.
How long are we talking?
3 to 4 hours, and sometimes months after the season is completely wrapped.
Wow. Months later.
The producers use these sessions to retroactively capture overall story points that were missed during field shooting. They're essentially retrofitting the participants' internal monologue to fit the edited footage they already have.
I remember reading about the physical tells that sometimes give this away, like noticeable weight fluctuations between the main scene footage and the confessional footage.
Or a participant suddenly having fresher cosmetic procedures like Botox or filler in those retrospective interviews.
They fight desperately against those tells.
They do. And to combat this temporal reality, producers enforce a very strict behavioral rule known as the present tense mandate.
The present tense mandate. I think I can guess what that is.
It is exactly what it sounds like. Participants are strictly coached, sometimes aggressively, to speak only as if the events they are describing are happening now.
So it requires a deep emotional reenactment.
Totally. If a participant reconciled with a rival 2 days ago, they must, in that confessional chair, manifest the anger they felt during the initial fight, all to maintain traumatic tension for the audience.
That must be profoundly exhausting. You have to emotionally live an experience twice, once when it happens, and then again weeks later for the cameras.
It's designed to break down emotional barriers, and the mandate's goal is twofold. Maintain tension, and, critically, avoid any reference to future events that might inadvertently spoil the narrative arc for the viewer.
And the dedication to maintaining this illusion of continuity can be pretty extreme.
Oh, absolutely. On shows like Hell's Kitchen or RuPaul's Drag Race, contestants have to wear the exact same outfit week after week for all of their confessional interviews.
All to ensure the audience never detects a break in the season's storyline.
Exactly.
This intense, repetitive, forced reenactment process must take a significant psychological toll. Which brings us to the producer-participant dialectic, this high-level psychological manipulation that primes participants to deliver those perfect, usable bites.
Yeah, the production environment it's entirely bespoke. It's designed specifically to exploit psychological vulnerabilities.
How so?
Often, participants are cast based on their potential for volatility, and then they're subjected to conditions that systematically strip away their traditional support systems.
And we're talking about more than just a lack of privacy, right? This is absolute isolation.
Total isolation. Participants are frequently deprived of phones, wallets, passports. They're cut off from family and friends. This creates this high-stress vacuum where emotions just become raw and heightened.
I think it was Emily Nussbaum who said something about this.
Right, the journalist. She noted that if you keep people in a box for all day long for 10 days, they will create their own drama. The producers just have to wait for the volatility to emerge.
And this vacuum allows the producers to step in as the participants' only trusted contact. This is the infamous and, deeply manipulative friend-producer tactic.
It is shockingly effective. Producers position themselves as the participant's only ally, their best friend, their therapist, in order to gain this intimate, often sensitive trust.
So they get them to bare their soul.
Exactly. They make them feel emotionally safe in that one-on-one setting, and participants often feel such a strong sense of loyalty to this one producer that they'll enthusiastically agree to whatever suggested storyline is proposed. They feel like they're collaborating with their one true friend.
So the trust they cultivated is then weaponized. It's used through coercive interview tactics, especially when they're trying to get the perfect sentence for a frankenbite.
In the diary room or confessional, participants are frequently subjected to really intense questioning. Producers will just repeatedly ask the same question, maybe using slightly different wording, over and over and over.
Until they get what they want.
Until they get the perfect, short, punchy sentence, the exact bite that works for the specific edit they're planning. This relentless interrogation is designed to break down their emotional guard and their game face.
And it ensures the network gets the high energy or highly emotional response they need.
But the emotional manipulation, it goes even further. It often relies on prior knowledge of the participant's deep personal trauma.
This is one of the most calculated and honestly cruel aspects noted in our sources.
It is. Producers may deliberately prime participants for emotional outbursts. They'll bring up deeply unrelated personal trauma, maybe the loss of a parent, a difficult childhood, financial stress, just to induce genuine, raw tears.
And then, immediately,
They pivot the conversation back to a current storyline conflict to associate those raw emotions and tears with the show's drama.
which makes the emotional response seem completely disproportionate and explosive in the final edit.
It's essentially manufactured crisis, using real-life pain as a catalyst for cheap drama.
And this intense, manipulative environment, it must leave former participants feeling profoundly disoriented.
We see that in the sources. One former participant described the experience of being gaslit, where they were genuinely struggling to remember an event accurately, but they were fed a detailed, pre-packaged storyline by the producer and forced to respond to it as if it were their own memory.
They lose trust in their own recollection.
Because they've been isolated and stressed into submission.
That disorientation is the perfect setup for what we, the audience, see, the villain edit. This deliberate editorial strategy designed to create conflict, generate buzz, and ultimately drive ratings.
It is the absolute pinnacle of editing power. The villain edit involves selectively choosing footage, removing context, or manipulating confessionals to make someone appear irrational, malicious, or just despicable.
Okay, let's pause here because we have to reiterate a key distinction the sources make. Not all villain edits are created equal, right? There's a crucial difference between a game persona villain and a personality villain.
That distinction is absolutely critical to understanding the real-world impact. In strategic competition shows like Survivor or Big Brother, the villain edit focuses on a game persona.
The audience gets that it's a game.
Generally, yeah. The audience understands that the villain might be a backstabbing, manipulative liar within the confines of the game, but this is often separate from their real life. Fans know it often takes a ruthless character to play a great game, and they separate the character from the person.
But in emotional or relationship-focused shows, like The Bachelorette or Love is Blind, the villain edit cuts much, much deeper.
It really does, because the whole premise of the show is that the participants are showing their authentic selves in their search for love, not just a game strategy.
So when editors create a villain edit in dating shows,
They're signaling to the audience that this person is genuinely a rotten, malicious, or abusive person off camera, and the consequences are terrifyingly severe. It leads to significant real-life backlash, death threats, social media abuse, all for individuals the audience now sees as genuinely bad people.
and the sources highlight the dramatic destruction of Nick Viall on The Bachelorette as a prime example of a personality edit gone rogue.
Viall came into that show emotionally guarded and reserved. He was worried about being exposed or hurt on television. He wasn't giving the producers the universally appealing, swoon-worthy narrative they wanted for their next Bachelor.
And because he wasn't the right fit for the franchise lead, he was essentially that fair game.
Fair game for destruction, that's how it's framed.
So they took his natural skepticism and his emotional guard and just amplified it into calculated maliciousness. How did they do that, editing-wise?
They systematically slaughtered him, as one editor described it. His dry, reserved humor was edited to appear mean-spirited. Even his mundane attempts to contact the Bachelorette after the season were spun as stalkerish in the live finale.
Even though he reportedly just asked the host if he could speak to her briefly.
Right. The entire apparatus was deployed to ensure his reputation was damaged because he didn't fit their predetermined narrative arc for the show.
And they took some mundane confrontation he was involved in, probably fueled by alcohol.
And gave it a disproportionate amount of dramatic screen time and heavy promotion.
So that's the key power move.
That's it. In another context, that scene might have been played for laughs at the expense of two belligerent drunk contestants. But in Viall's edit, they used their immense power control over screen time, music cues, to ensure that that incident was the defining moment of his villainous character. It validated the narrative that he was genuinely malicious, not just poorly suited for reality TV.
We've established how sophisticated frankenbiting is in the world of entertainment and, character assassination. But now we have to transition to where the ethical stakes become truly existential.
In news and political reporting.
Exactly. The distinction between editing for drama and editing for journalistic integrity is razor thin, and sometimes it's just entirely absent.
And this transition brings us to the extreme high-profile case of the BBC editing a speech by a public figure. This ultimately resulted in the director and the head of news losing their jobs.
And facing a massive legal threat.
A huge one. This incident perfectly illustrates the dangers of the frankenbite technique when you apply it to fact-based reporting.
Okay, so what was the specific edit that caused this level of fallout? We are talking about a threatened $1 billion lawsuit, which is not trivial.
No. The controversy centered on splicing two sound bites that were approximately 54 minutes apart in the original speech.
54 minutes.
The public figure had been speaking for over an hour, often rambling, shifting topics. The editors took a statement on topic A and seamlessly connected it to a statement on topic Z, creating one continuous, highly inflammatory sentence.
And how did they hide that massive jump in time?
They used all the tricks we've been talking about. No visible visual transition, no flash or dip to white. It was all covered with B-roll footage of the crowd.
Yeah, I'm guessing the audio was cleaned up.
Meticulously. The crowd noise was removed to maintain a clean, uninterrupted vocal track. So the audience had zero cues that nearly an hour had passed between those two statements.
Internally, I know some editors argued that the cut was acceptable. They suggested it remained true to the intention of the rambling speech. Is that the dangerous justification we talked about earlier?
That is precisely the dangerous justification. The ethical line here isn't about whether the content was false. The core violation was the misrepresentation of continuity and timing.
Right.
Seamlessly connecting statements made nearly an hour apart fundamentally misrepresents the speaker's context and timing. It suggests a premeditation, a direct causal link between the ideas that simply wasn't there when they were delivered.
So while the speaker may have said both things, putting them back to back made the comment significantly more inflammatory and damaging than it was in its original context.
Exactly. And that 54-minute gap was deemed too crazy for news and politics by many other editors. They argued it went far beyond standard editorial condensation. Even if the edited statement reflected the speaker's overall rhetoric, the failure to signal the passage of time transformed a long, meandering speech into a concise, aggressive, and highly actionable soundbite.
This whole incident forced a deep internal ethical reckoning within the news industry, and it raises a crucial ethical litmus test, one that's borrowed from the older world of print journalism.
We have to ask, would a respected print reporter have connected those two statements without indicating the passage of time or, using an ellipsis?
And the answer is no.
The ethical standard in print journalism would absolutely require separating the quotes with contextual information, like, the public figure stated X. However, later in the hour-long speech, they pivoted and said Y.
And the absence of that contextual cue, whether it's an ellipsis in print or a transitional flash on screen, is what creates the fabricated narrative in broadcast.
It creates the fraud of continuity. Our sources suggest that editors, even working under these tight time constraints, proposed clear alternative solutions that would have satisfied the need for brevity while still respecting the journalistic standard.
What were they?
A simple, clear transition, a dip to white or a standard flash transition, which clearly signifies the passage of time and the discontinuity of the quote. It would have provided the necessary context to avoid the massive legal and ethical fallout.
But when these edited statements, whether from reality TV or the news, cross the line into false claims that directly harm a person's reputation, that's when the courts get involved. And they struggle immensely to distinguish between edited fact and manufactured fiction.
This is the legal mess created by blurring the lines. The difficulty courts face is dealing with media products that intentionally confuse the audience.
Right, like news shows that offer spirited debate with fact claims mixed in, or works of fiction that claim to be based on real events.
And to successfully sue for defamation, particularly if you're a public figure, you have to meet an incredibly high bar. You have to prove actual malice.
Okay, let's define actual malice for our listeners, because it's often misunderstood as simply meaning the defendant was being mean-spirited.
It's way more technical and demanding than that. Actual malice is the legal standard public figures must meet. It requires proving the defendant, in this case the editor, producer, or network, either knew the statement was false or they entertained serious doubts as to its falsity. You have to prove the editor wasn't just wrong or negligent, but that they had malicious intent regarding the truth of the statement.
So, a public figure claiming, the editor fabricated this quote and ruined my reputation, has to prove that the editor in the suite knew the splice was false and did it anyway. That sounds almost impossible to prove.
It is extremely difficult. And because the standard is so high, public figures often lose defamation cases, even when they have been clearly misrepresented or injured by a frankenbite. The defense just has to argue, we believed the edit reflected his true intent even if the words weren't sequential.
And even if the edited statement isn't 100% accurate, the defendant can fall back on the defense of substantial truth.
That's a key legal concept that gives tremendous latitude to editors and producers. A statement doesn't need to be 100% literal truth. It's considered true if the sting, the effect on the average reader or viewer, would have been the same, even if minor inaccuracies were corrected.
So if the editor frankenbites a contestant to say, I despise her and I want her off the show, but what the contestant actually said was, I really dislike her and I think she should go home.
The legal argument would be that the sting is the same. The audience perceives hatred and a desire for removal, even if the language was slightly exaggerated in the edit.
I see. The editorial license to amplify emotion is protected by the substantial truth doctrine, as long as the underlying essence of the message is consistent.
Exactly.
On top of that, courts generally protect non-actionable statements, things like opinions, hyperbole, and parody. But this entire legal framework gets incredibly messy when factual statements that can be proven true or false are embedded within content that's otherwise presented as opinion, fiction, or hyperbole.
This is the problem of the blurring of reality and fiction in modern media. I mean, think about the classic, famous opening credits of the Coen brothers film Fargo.
Right. This isn't a true story.
It famously begins with the text, "This is a true story. The events depicted in this film took place in Minnesota in 1987, and it ends with, the rest has been told exactly as it occurred."
And then the writer, Joel Cohen, later confirmed the story was almost entirely made up.
Right, save for two very minor real-life events, but those opening credits created an expectation of absolute fact in the viewer's mind. A viewer carries that expectation into the narrative, making it much harder for them to dismiss the events as non-actionable fiction if they contain defamatory elements.
And this problem is accelerating dramatically in digital media. Online journalism is so much more conversational and less formal.
Absolutely. It emphasizes personal perspectives and opinions over objective reporting. We see a reduction in the traditional visual cues, the formal block quotes, the clear ellipses, the strict separation in traditional print media that alert readers to the difference between opinion and fact.
So the courts, in navigating all this, have to be extremely mindful not to let the general tenor of a publication, say, describing a show as spirited debate and powerful reporting, to excuse specific fabricated statements that a reasonable audience member could easily interpret as fact.
Exactly. The context is often the key to proving defamation.
So we've dissected the technical tools and the legal challenges. Now let's get into the why this all works so effectively on us, the audience. And this brings us to the science of perception and editing.
That's right. It's not just that we choose to believe it. Our brains are fundamentally wired to process context in a certain way.
And this is the realm of the Kuleshov effect.
A foundational principle of cinematic editing, and it's the scientific justification for why cheating footage and frankenbiting are so effective. Editors are relying on manipulating our natural cognitive biases.
Remind us of the classic Kuleshov experiment.
The Kuleshov effect, named after the Soviet filmmaker Lev Kuleshov, demonstrates that contextual framing drastically influences how our brain interprets identical facial expressions. In the historical experiment, audiences were shown an identical shot of an actor's neutral, unmoving face.
But it was juxtaposed with different images.
Right. First, a bowl of hot soup. Second, a dead woman. Third, a woman reclining seductively.
And the audience attributed entirely different emotions to the exact same neutral face.
Precisely. They attributed hunger after the soup, sadness after the dead woman, and desire after the reclining woman. The audience was convinced the actor's expression had changed, when in reality it hadn't changed at all. The context created the emotion.
And our sources confirm this psychological effect with modern scientific evidence, which makes the editor's work even more impactful.
It does. fMRI data provides hard evidence that context alters activity in brain regions related to social cognition. We're talking about regions like the temporal pole, the insula, and the anterior cingulate cortex, or ACC.
So this isn't just subjective interpretation. We are seeing brain activity fundamentally shift simply based on the juxtaposition of images.
We are. So when we see an editor manipulate a neutral reaction shot, say an eye roll, and pair it with a new context, the science suggests our brain is fundamentally forced to process that emotion as real. We're not just interpreting the scene.
We are physically attributing the edited emotion to the subject.
That is the dramatic implication. The amygdala, which is central to processing affective value, is activated when subtle, happy, or fearful faces are juxtaposed with congruent contexts. Editors are speaking directly to your subconscious perception of reality. They're relying on this deep-seated human tendency to trust our senses and trust the context provided by the cut.
Which means those reaction shots, often called listening footage or cutaways, the sighs, the head nods, the blank stares, they are eventually emotional blank checks for the production team.
That's a perfect way to put it. Producers film hours of this neutral footage, knowing they can use it to justify any narrative later. Pairing a neutral shot, an eye roll taken 3 hours later out of sheer boredom, with a newly constructed context, like a rival winning a challenge, instantly creates the truth of jealousy or anger in the audience's brain.
Our brain is neurologically primed by the edit to attribute that emotion.
And once that belief is formed, it's incredibly difficult to shake.
And this psychological trick, it extends to dialogue too, right? When editors are trying to hide a technical flaw in a frankenbite, if the audio is slightly off, they have a way to make us hear the intended word anyway.
That's the McGurk effect. It explains how visual perception can override subtle discrepancies in audio. If the audience sees a contestant's lips forming a certain sound or word, their brain will prioritize that visual cue over slight discrepancies in the audio track.
So if the editor splices in a word that doesn't perfectly match the subject's mouth movements, our brain uses the visual movement of the lips to smooth over the auditory difference.
It allows editors to effectively hide slightly revoiced or stitched lines within a frankenbite. It creates a seamless experience even if the auditory and visual signals are subtly mismatched. It's why the frankenbite is such a powerful tool. It leverages our own cognitive processes against us.
This manipulation of performance and context, this blurring of reality, it's not a totally new concept. It has deep roots in performance-based media.
Which takes us to the world of professional wrestling and the concept of kayfabe.
Kayfabe.
Kayfabe is the practice, derived from wrestling, of maintaining the illusion of reality within an inherently fake or predetermined setting. For decades, wrestling performers maintained that their storylines, their rivalries, their pain, it was all real.
Despite the audience knowing, on some level, that the outcome was fixed.
Right. But the ethical and legal line in that industry started to blur when they introduced the concept of the worked shoot.
Okay, a work shoot.
It's when you deliberately blend fact and fiction to make viewers question what is truly real. Is the wrestler speaking as the character or as the actual person behind the persona? And this blending had massive legal consequences in the defamation case involving the wrestler Hulk Hogan.
Whose real name is Terry Bollea.
Exactly.
So why did the court struggle with the Hogan case, especially since wrestling is generally considered entertainment?
The core problem was that when the wrestling promotion WCW introduced these worked shoot angles, they effectively surrendered the right to claim the defense that everyone knows wrestling is fake when specific, plausible, defamatory statements were made.
They blurred the lines too much.
They blurred them so thoroughly that the audience was primed to believe the underlying reality was bleeding through the fictional narrative.
How did they prime the audience to believe the real person, Terry Bollea, was speaking, and not the character, Hulk Hogan?
Well, the promotion had previously featured interviews where the real-life Bollea discussed the viability and future of the fictional character Hulk Hogan. They intentionally intertwine the character and the person.
I see.
So when an on-screen authority figure made comments about Hogan using his real-life creative control to try and hold down younger wrestlers, a reasonable wrestling fan could easily believe he was talking about the real person, Terry Bollea, and his business practices, not just the fictional character.
But the initial court dismissed the case, concluding that the promo could not be understood as stating actual facts about Bollea.
Exactly. The court failed to consider the average viewer's perception in an environment where reality and fiction were deliberately intertwined. And this mirrors the problem in reality TV and news shows. When you intentionally blend opinion, fact, fiction, and character, specific, actionable statements can get embedded in content that is otherwise considered non-actionable hyperbole.
And the legal system often struggles to protect the individual who is edited and defamed within that manufactured narrative.
It really does.
And that brings us to the final and most current challenge. The legal reckoning happening in reality TV today, focusing on the fundamental rights of the participants who were subjected to all of this editing and psychological coercion.
This is a major turning point. Historically, reality participants have been classified as independent contractors rather than employees.
Which is vital for the networks.
Absolutely. It exempts participants from critical labor protections like Minimum wage, overtime pay, workplace safety standards. It allows producers to work them into the ground for drama.
And the production companies enforce this status with incredibly restrictive contractual restrictions, mostly NDAs, right? Designed to silence any dissent.
These NDAs are incredibly punitive. They explicitly prevent contestants from publicly discussing negative experiences, production coercion, or misleading edits, often under the threat of being sued for millions of dollars. The imbalance of power is total.
There was that great quote from a critic.
Right, pointing out the absurdity. They can't talk about what their producer did to them. They can't talk about being filmed 24 hours a day. And if their producer made them cry by asking them numerous personal questions based on their psychiatric evaluation forms, and then took that crying out of context in the edit, they are powerless.
And this imbalance was thrown into stark relief with the case involving Love is Blind contestant Renee Poche.
Yeah, she spoke out against the producers. Poche alleged she was forced into an engagement with a man with a documented history of violence after she tried to break things off. When she spoke publicly about her negative experiences and the psychological toll,
The production company came after her.
immediately, they initiated arbitration against her, claiming she violated her NDA and seeking a staggering $4 million in damages.
$4 million.
It showed the brutal legal power production companies wield to maintain control over the narrative and silence participants, regardless of the participants' mental health or safety.
Seeking $4 million just to prevent a participant from discussing their experience illustrates the immense value they place on controlling that narrative. But 2024 brought a major shift that could force a seismic change in the industry.
Yes. The National Labor Relations Board, the NLRB, filed a formal complaint against the production companies of Love is Blind.
And what was their argument?
They specifically argued that the contestants should, in fact, be classified as employees, not independent contractors.
What is the significance of the NLRB stepping in here? This feels huge.
It is a massive legal move because the NLRB complaint formally recognizes the immense value of the contestants' labor. Their engineered drama isn't just incidental background noise. It generates tremendous financial value viewership, viral online engagement, and crucially, subscriptions for networks and studios.
So if they're ruled to be employees,
It would fundamentally change labor laws. It would require minimum wage and overtime, and it would provide a much stronger legal position for contestants to fight the coercive editing and manipulative production tactics we've discussed.
it acknowledges that the drama, whether it's manufactured or not, is their work product.
And they deserve the protection of workers.
Exactly. And until that ruling comes down, we have to remember that the ultimate decision makers, the producers and predators, often operate without any clear ethical guidance. Their primary, often singular directive is just create entertaining stories.
And they have a massive toolkit, from the frankenbite to psychological coercion, to ensure that happens.
This deep dive has truly revealed the synthetic core of modern media. I mean, we started with the simple surgical definition of the frankenbite stitching words together and saw how this core technical ability is weaponized across two distinct media landscapes.
Right, from reality TV all the way to the highest levels of political news.
We established the technical sophistication of the predator, who uses tools like plosive consonants, ambience overlap, and cheating footage to streamline or completely fabricate narratives.
Often under immense pressure. We saw that the technology is designed to deceive the ear and the eye at the same time.
Then we dove deep into the psychological toll, showing how the confessional is this machine of temporal displacement, forcing participants to reenact raw emotions weeks later under the present tense mandate.
Often after being coerced and isolated by the friend producer tactic in environments that are basically designed for breakdown.
And we connected these micro-manipulations to these huge macro consequences. From the BBC losing its leadership over a 54-minute splice that changed political context and meaning,
To the courts struggling to apply the defamation standards of actual malice and substantial truth when dealing with publications that intentionally blur the line between performance and reality.
which was the key failure in the Hulk Hogan case.
Exactly.
And finally, we noted the monumental legal reckoning that's happening right now. The 2024 NLRB complaint against Love is Blind threatens to redefine participants from independent contractors to employees.
And hopefully bring much-needed labor protections against the restrictive NDAs and coercive editing that have historically silenced them.
Ultimately, the entire system prioritizes high-stakes drama over reality.
And it's all driven by the scientific understanding that editing fundamentally changes our cognitive attribution of emotion, the Kuleshov effect in relentless action.
So we'll leave you with this provocative thought. We often rely on this cultural concept of the irony bribe, the idea that we can enjoy the content while maintaining a healthy skepticism. But given the technical ability to seamlessly deceive and the scientific fact that editing physically dictates how our brains assign emotion and intent to faces and voices, is our human ability to critically analyze what we see keeping pace with the technical ability to deceive? What is the true cost of prioritizing drama over reality, not just for the participants, but for our shared perception of truth in a hyper-edited media environment?
Something to mull over the next time you hear a perfectly crafted, seemingly spontaneous soundbite.
Until the next deep dive, stay informed.